What does it really cost to cut the world in half? And who pays that price when an empire wants a shortcut? Along the sandy spine of Egypt, men once dug under a punishing sun so ships could save days at sea. Some were compelled by forced labor, many faced disease, and thousands never went home. And yet, when the water finally flowed between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, global power tilted, quietly at first, then violently. In the next 20 minutes, you'll see how the Suez Canal was built, how it redrew trade and war, why it became a symbol worth invading for, and why a single stuck ship in our own time exposed just how fragile this modern miracle still is. Stand on a map and it looks almost obvious. A narrow isthmus between two seas, a small distance that forces a massive detour. Before Suez, a ship leaving London for India or East Asia had to round the Cape of Good Hope, thousands of extra miles through the Atlantic and the stormy southern oceans. With Suez, Europe and Asia suddenly sit closer, so close that strategy, economics, and pride begin to overlap. The canal doesn't just connect two bodies of water. It connects supply chains, fleets, colonies, and the fates of nations. But this was not the first time humans tried to turn Egypt into a bridge between seas. Long before steam engines, there were canals linking the Nile to the Red Sea through desert valleys. Projects started, abandoned, revived, and finally lost across centuries of shifting rulers and shifting sand. The idea kept returning because geography kept asking the same question. Why go around a continent when you can cut through it? The 19th century supplied the missing ingredients: industrial machinery, European finance, and imperial impatience. Ferdinand de Lesseps, a French diplomat with connections in Egypt's ruling circles, secured concessions in the 1850s to form a company and build a canal open to ships of all nations, at least on paper. Work began in 1859 near what would become Port Said, and for a decade the isthmus became a giant construction site where politics and engineering worked side by side, sometimes as partners, sometimes as enemies. The excavation was brutal, and not only because the desert gives nothing away easily. Early digging relied heavily on forced labor systems, the corvée, pulling large numbers of Egyptian workers into back-breaking manual work. Disease spread through crowded camps, and cholera outbreaks struck with particular cruelty in the 1860s. The death toll is still debated, with widely different claims in historical accounts, but what matters for understanding the canal's legacy is this. The canal was not carved only by machines and ambition. It was also carved by human bodies pushed to their limits by hunger, heat, and epidemics. And yet the project kept moving, because behind the suffering was a machine of money and prestige that rarely stops once it starts. As years passed, mechanized dredgers increasingly replaced manual digging, and the canal took shape as a sea-level passage without locks. An engineering choice that made the dream faster but also introduced new environmental consequences, allowing marine species to move between seas in ways that would slowly transform ecosystems. Even nature, it turns out, would be drafted into the story. Then came the moment designed to look like destiny. On November 17, 1869, the Suez Canal officially opened with elaborate ceremonies that drew the gaze of Europe's elite. It was theater, but it was also announcement. A new era had arrived, and the route to the east had been shortened by human will. The world's oceans were still the same size, but the world's time had changed. So what changed first, trade or power? The honest answer is, they changed together, and neither could pretend to be separate. The canal made shipping cheaper and faster, which meant goods moved differently. Ports rose and fell, and merchants adjusted routes like blood flow shifting through a newly opened artery. But navies adjusted too. A warship that can move quickly between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea is not just a ship, it is leverage. And leverage is what empires live on. Britain understood that almost immediately, because Britain's imperial system depended on the route to India. At first, London had been skeptical of the canal, but strategic reality has a way of converting skepticism into urgency. In 1875, Britain's Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli moved to buy a huge block of canal company shares from Egypt's financially strained ruler, a deal that gave Britain major influence over what was quickly becoming the most valuable shortcut on Earth. The canal wasn't officially British, but influence doesn't need a flag to function. And when influence wasn't enough, control followed. In the decades that came, European powers tightened their grip on Egypt's finances and politics, and the canal became a central reason the country could not be left alone. You can draw a straight line from the canal's strategic value to the pressure that pulled Egypt deeper into the orbit of imperial decision-making. The canal promised open passage. But open for whom? And under whose terms? To reduce conflict on paper, the Constantinople Convention of 1888 declared that the canal should be free and open, in peace and war, without distinction of flag, and should not be subjected to blockade. It was a beautiful principle, and it has echoed through international law ever since. But the canal's history would repeatedly prove a darker truth. Treaties can state the rules, yet power often decides how those rules feel in real life. Through the first half of the 20th century, the canal's strategic value only increased. Global trade expanded, oil became the fuel of industry and war, and the canal stood right where oil routes and military planning overlapped. During the World Wars, the canal zone was a focal point because controlling it meant controlling movement of troops, of supplies, of the economic lifelines that made prolonged war possible. The canal wasn't just infrastructure, it was a pressure point. Then history turned, as it often does, on a word that sounds administrative but is actually explosive: nationalization. On July 26, 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser announced the nationalization of the Suez Canal Company. For Egypt, it was sovereignty, taking back a symbol of foreign control and using its revenues for national development. For Britain and France, it was a shock to the old imperial order, and they feared the precedent. If Egypt could take Suez, what else could slip from their grasp? So the canal became the center of a crisis that revealed the new world replacing the old one. In late October 1956, Israel invaded Egypt's Sinai. Britain and France soon joined the operation, launching attacks and landing forces near Port Said. Militarily, they could move. Politically, they were trapped. The United States, worried about colonial optics and Cold War escalation, pushed hard for a ceasefire through the United Nations, and the Soviet Union loomed in the background as a dangerous variable. Under intense pressure, the invasion forces withdrew. In a matter of weeks, the Suez Crisis showed that the era when European empires could unilaterally reshape the Middle East was ending, and that global power had shifted toward Washington and Moscow. But even after the headlines faded, the canal kept asking the same question in new forms. Who really controls global choke points? Legal owners, military powers, or the system of trade that can punish any disruption? The canal reopened, commerce resumed, and yet the deeper lesson lingered. Suez was no longer just a canal. It was a symbol of post-colonial resistance, a reminder of imperial vulnerability, and a preview of how the Cold War would play out in regions where geography itself becomes a prize. Then, in 1967, the canal fell silent. After the outbreak of the Six-Day War, Egypt closed the Suez Canal, and it remained closed for nearly 8 years. The closure wasn't an abstract inconvenience. It was a shockwave through shipping routes and economies. Cargo that once moved through Egypt had to circle Africa again. Longer voyages, higher costs, and new strategic calculations. And in the middle of the canal, history staged one of its strangest images: a group of 15 ships, trapped in the Great Bitter Lake, coated over time with desert sand until sailors nicknamed them the Yellow Fleet. While armies faced each other across the canal's banks, these ships became floating islands of waiting, their crews forming a small community inside a global stalemate. Why did it take so long to bring the canal back? Because reopening it wasn't just a political decision, it was a physical one. Mines, wrecks, debris, and unexploded ordnance turned the canal into a dangerous corridor. After the 1973 Yom Kippur War and subsequent disengagement agreements, multinational clearance and salvage efforts worked to make the waterway navigable again. Only in June 1975 did the canal reopen to traffic, a return that felt less like a ribbon cutting and more like a system restart after years of geopolitical damage. From that point on, the canal entered a new phase: modernization, expansion, and the relentless pressure of global trade. Ships grew larger, containerization transformed logistics, and the canal had to deepen, widen, and manage traffic more efficiently. In 2015, Egypt inaugurated a major project often referred to as the New Suez Canal, adding a parallel lane along part of the route and upgrading bypasses to reduce transit time and increase capacity. It was a statement that the canal wasn't just a relic of 19th century ambition, it was still a living engine of national revenue and global commerce. And yet, even in the 21st century, Suez kept proving a final, uncomfortable truth. The more the world depends on a choke point, the more dramatic the consequences when that choke point fails. In March 2021, a single container ship, the Ever Given, ran aground and blocked the canal for 6 days. Satellite images showed a modern world brought to a halt by a single diagonal line of steel. Hundreds of ships queued at both ends, supply chains stretched, and everyone was reminded that global trade, for all its digital sophistication, still depends on narrow physical passages carved into the earth. The canal reopened on March 29, 2021, but the lesson remained open-ended. The story didn't stop there. In 2024, canal revenues plunged sharply amid regional insecurity and diverted shipping routes. A reminder that control of a waterway is never only about dredging and schedules. It's also about safety, perception, and the surrounding political weather. And Egypt has continued to pursue further improvements and extensions to reduce congestion and risk. Suez is constantly being rebuilt, not because it is failing as an idea, but because the world keeps demanding more from it than it was ever designed to carry. So, after more than a century and a half, what is the Suez Canal? Engineering triumph, imperial instrument, national symbol, or global vulnerability? The honest answer is, all of them at once. It began as a dream to save time, but it also became a machine that rearranged power. It accelerated trade, but it also concentrated risk. It promised open passage, yet repeatedly became a battlefield of sovereignty and influence. And through it all, the canal has forced the same moral question back into view. When humanity reshapes geography for profit and power, who gets the benefit, and who absorbs the cost? If this film changed the way you see that thin blue line on the map, take a moment to like the video, subscribe for more history told through the forces that shape our world, and tell me in the comments. Do you think the Suez Canal's greatest legacy is the engineering itself, the human cost of building it, or the way it permanently rewired global power, and why?